The sun was beginning to set as Andra pulled into the parking lot of Westside Grocery. The fading light painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. It had been a long week for him. The high school basketball team he coached had lost their third game in a row, and the principal was starting to ask questions about his coaching methods. But today wasn't about work. Today was about keeping a promise to his 12-year-old nephew who was staying over for the weekend. "Make your famous curry chicken," his nephew had begged over the phone. And Andra, despite his exhaustion, couldn't say no. That boy had been through enough already with his parents' divorce. A home-cooked meal seemed like such a small thing, but Andra knew better. Food was more than just sustenance. It was comfort, it was tradition, it was love. Andra grabbed a shopping cart, noticing the wobbly wheel right away. Just his luck. He pushed it anyway, the rhythmic squeak following him through the automatic doors and into the cool, air-conditioned store. The familiar smell of produce and freshly baked bread greeted him, along with the soft music playing overhead. Mr. Wilson, the elderly security guard who'd been working there since Andra was a boy himself, gave him a friendly nod. "Youth League keeping you busy?" Mr. Wilson asked, his wrinkled face breaking into a smile. "Always," Andra replied with a laugh. "Those kids run me ragged, but I wouldn't have it any other way." As he made his way down the first aisle, Andra pulled out his phone to check the recipe he'd saved. Onions, garlic, ginger, chicken thighs, the list went on. His grandmother would have scolded him for needing a recipe for something she'd taught him to cook countless times, but he wanted to get it just right. The store wasn't too crowded for a Saturday evening. A few families pushed carts overflowing with weekly supplies. An old woman carefully examined every apple before placing it in her basket. Two teenagers giggled by the snack section, probably planning a movie night. Everyone was going about their business, wrapped up in their own little worlds. Andra moved methodically through the produce section, selecting the ripest tomatoes and the freshest bunch of cilantro. He picked up a piece of ginger, squeezing it gently between his fingers to check its firmness the way his grandmother had taught him. The simple act of shopping for these ingredients brought back memories of standing on a stool in her kitchen, barely tall enough to see over the counter, watching her hands work magic with the simplest ingredients. He checked the time, just past 6. If he hurried, he could be home by 7, giving him plenty of time to prepare the meal before his nephew arrived at 8. The boy had texted earlier, excited about showing Andra his new basketball shoes. "They're just like yours," the message had read, followed by too many exclamation points. Andra smiled at the memory as he turned his cart toward the meat section. It was then that he heard a voice rise above the gentle background noise of the store. At first, he thought it might be a child having a tantrum that happened often enough in grocery stores. But as he listened more carefully, he realized it was a man's voice, harsh and mocking. Andra frowned, his hand pausing over a package of chicken thighs. He tried to ignore it, focusing instead on checking the expiration date. Everyone had bad days. It wasn't his business to get involved in other people's arguments. He placed the chicken in his cart and moved toward the spice aisle, but the voice followed him, growing louder, more insistent. Now he could make out a second voice joining in, both of them targeting someone else. Andrew's shoulders tensed. The store suddenly felt different, the fluorescent lights a little too bright, the music a little too quiet to cover what was happening. He looked around, noticing how other shoppers were ducking their heads, pushing their carts a little faster, pretending not to hear. Something about their avoidance bothered him deeply. It reminded him of all the times people had looked away when he needed someone to step up. With a deep breath, Andrew left his cart by the spice rack and followed the sound of those harsh voices, not yet knowing how this simple decision would change so many lives, including his own. Andrew turned the corner into the next aisle and immediately saw what was happening. A young woman stood with her shopping cart, a little girl about 5 or 6 years old, clutching the hem of her mother's dress. The child's eyes were wide with fear, her small fingers twisted in the fabric. The woman had one hand protectively on her daughter's shoulder, the other gripping her purse strap so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Two men towered over her, one leaning against the shelf of breakfast cereals, the other standing with his arms crossed. Neither looked particularly threatening at first glance, just ordinary guys in jeans and t-shirts, but something in their posture, in the way they had cornered the woman, sent a jolt of uneasiness through Andrew's body. Taking all our tax dollars with those food stamps, one of the men was saying, his voice dripping with contempt. Must be nice getting handouts while the rest of us work for a living. The woman stared at the floor, her shoulders hunched as if trying to make herself smaller. Her shopping cart contained basic essentials: milk, bread, some vegetables, chicken, and a small box of crayons that was probably a rare treat for her daughter. "Mummy," the little girl whispered, tugging at her mother's dress. "Can we go now?" "Yeah, Mummy," the second man mocked in a high-pitched voice. "Run along now. But leave those steaks behind. That's too good for people on welfare." Ando glanced around. An elderly couple quickly pushed their cart in the opposite direction. A teenage boy with a store uniform stocked shelves at the far end, pretending not to notice. A middle-aged woman peeked around the corner, made eye contact with Ando for a brief second, then hurried away. The woman finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Please leave us alone. I'm just trying to buy groceries for my daughter." "Hear that, Tony? She's just trying to buy groceries," the first man said with exaggerated sympathy. "With my money." The little girl was now hiding behind her mother, only her big brown eyes visible as she peered around the woman's leg. Those eyes found Andrew's, and in them he saw something that hit him like a punch to the gut, not just fear, but resignation. As if, even at her young age, she was already learning that this was just how the world worked. And suddenly Andrew was transported back to his own childhood. He was 7 years old again, standing in a different grocery store while his mother tried to count out exact change, the impatient signs of customers behind them growing louder. He remembered the shame burning his cheeks when his mother had to put back the box of cookies because they couldn't afford them that week. His throat tightened. The basketball coach in him, the one who taught kids about teamwork and standing up for each other, seemed to whisper in his ear, "What are you going to do about this?" Andrew looked down at his hands, strong hands that had once caught basketballs, that had held his sister's newborn baby, that had closed his grandmother's eyes when she passed. Hands that could do something right now. An announcement crackled over the store speakers about a special on aisle 5. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed. Normal life continued all around them while this small moment of cruelty played out in the cereal aisle. The woman was now trying to maneuver her cart around the men, but one of them shifted, blocking her path. "In a hurry?" he asked with a smirk. "Got more free stuff to pick up somewhere else." The other shoppers continued to hurry past, eyes averted, faces carefully blank. Each one making the small, seemingly inconsequential choice to look away, to stay uninvolved, to mind their own business. Andrew took a deep breath. His nephew wouldn't be arriving for another 2 hours. The curry chicken could wait. He straightened his shoulders and stepped forward, crossing an invisible line between bystander and participant. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but carrying the natural authority he used when calling plays from the sidelines. "Is there a problem here?" Time seemed to slow down as Andrew stepped toward the confrontation. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. A voice in the back of his mind whispered that this wasn't his fight, that he should just grab his groceries and go home. He had his own problems to deal with: the losing basketball team, rent due next week, his sister asking for help with her son's college applications. Why add more trouble? The little girl peeked out from behind her mother again, those big brown eyes now fixed on him with a mixture of hope and doubt. Had she seen this scene play out before? People stepping up, only to back down when things got uncomfortable? Or worse, nobody stepping up at all? Andrew thought about his students, how they watched his every move both on and off the court. He always told them that character wasn't about what you did when everyone was looking, but what you chose to do when you thought nobody was. He didn't know it, but several shoppers were now watching from the ends of the aisle, hesitating, waiting to see what would happen next. "I asked if there was a problem here," Andrew repeated, his voice firmer this time. The two men turned toward him, momentarily surprised by the interruption. The taller one, who had been doing most of the talking, sized Andrew up. "Mind your own business, man," he said. "This doesn't concern you." Andrew took another step forward, not aggressively, but enough to establish his presence in the situation. He deliberately kept his hands visible at his sides, palms slightly open. Years of navigating public spaces as a large black man had taught him the importance of appearing non-threatening even when standing his ground. When you're making a child scared in a public place that concerns everyone, Andra said calmly. The mother used this moment to pull her daughter closer, whispering something in the child's ear. The girl nodded but kept her eyes on Andra, as if trying to decide if he was really going to help or just pass through like all the others. "Look at this, Tony, we got ourselves a hero," the second man said with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "You got a problem with us having a conversation?" Andrew noticed the way the man emphasized conversation, as if what had been happening was just a friendly chat rather than harassment. He'd seen this tactic before, bullies reframing their actions when called out, making the person who intervened seem like the unreasonable one. "Nobody's trying to be a hero," Andrew replied. "But that didn't sound like a conversation to me. Sounded like you were giving this lady a hard time about how she pays for her groceries." A small crowd had formed now, pretending to shop while watching the scene unfold. An older woman with a shopping basket hesitated at the end of the aisle. A teenage boy in a store uniform had stopped stocking shelves and was looking nervously toward the front of the store, probably wondering if he should get a manager. The first man stepped closer to Andra. "What, are you her boyfriend or something? You people always stick together, don't you?" The words hung in the air, the implied meaning clear to everyone listening. Andra felt a familiar heat rise in his chest, the anger that came with these moments, the exhaustion of dealing with them again and again throughout his life. He took a deep breath, remembering the techniques he taught his players for staying focused during intense games. "I don't know this woman," Andra said, keeping his voice steady. "But I know what it's like to be a single parent trying to make ends meet. My mom raised me and my sister on her own, working 2 jobs. Sometimes she needed help. There's no shame in that." A flash of something, recognition, perhaps, crossed the second man's face, but his friend wasn't backing down. "So what, we can't say anything now?" "That's the problem these days. Everybody's too sensitive." Andro shook his head slightly. "You can say what you want. That's your right. And it's my right to stand here and make sure this woman and her daughter can shop in peace." The mother looked up at Andra, a silent thank you in her eyes. Her daughter's grip on her dress had loosened slightly, her small shoulders no longer hunched in fear. That alone made whatever came next worth it to Andra. He wasn't looking for a fight. In fact, he was desperately hoping to avoid one. But he also wasn't going to walk away. Not this time. Not ever again. The taller man took a step closer to Andra, invading his personal space. "You think you're some kind of hero, don't you?" His breath smelled of coffee and cigarettes. Big man coming to rescue the damsel in distress. Andra didn't step back. He'd faced down angrier men than this on basketball courts and in classrooms with troubled teens. But he also didn't move forward or raise his hands. Instead, he kept his voice level, almost conversational. "No heroes here," Andra said, "just people trying to get through their day." He glanced at the mother and her daughter, then back at the men. "All of us." The second man, shorter but stockier, moved to stand beside his friend. "You know what these people do, right? They get all these benefits while working under the table. Driving nice cars, getting their nails done, while honest folks like us can barely make rent." An older man pushing a cart slowed down at the end of the aisle. A young couple with a baby stopped pretending to look at pasta. The teenage store clerk had disappeared, probably to find the manager. The audience was growing. "I don't know anything about this lady except she's shopping for groceries with her child," Andra said. "Same as most folks here." He turned slightly to face the growing crowd of onlookers. "Same as most of you." The mother finally spoke up, her voice quiet but clear. "I work full-time at the hospital. I'm a nursing assistant." Her hands trembled slightly, but her chin was raised. "I'm on assistance temporarily because my husband died last year, and I'm still sorting out the insurance." Her words hung in the air. The little girl pressed herself against her mother's side, no longer hiding but watching everything with wide, solemn eyes. Andra saw something shift in the faces of the onlookers, the beginning of shame, perhaps, for their earlier silence. "Nobody asked for your life story," the taller man said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. He looked around, suddenly aware of the audience they'd attracted. "Actually, you kind of did," Andrew replied. "You made assumptions about her life the moment you saw her use that card. But you don't know her story. None of us do." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We're all just trying to feed our families." An elderly woman with silver hair pushed her cart forward. She'd been watching from the end of the aisle. "He's right, you know," she said, her voice creaky but strong. "My late husband and I needed food stamps after he got sick. 40 years he worked at the factory, never missed a day. Then cancer came, and suddenly we needed help." The shorter man shifted uncomfortably. "That's different." "Is it?" Andra asked, not unkindly. "How do you know?" The store manager finally appeared, a nervous-looking man in his 40s with a name tag that read Doug. He approached cautiously, like someone approaching a bar fight that might spill over. "Is there a problem here?" Doug asked, looking between the men and Andra. "No problem," Andra said before the others could speak. "Just a misunderstanding about how we treat our neighbors." He turned to the two men. "Isn't that right?" The taller man looked at his friend, then at the growing crowd, clearly calculating his options. Pride warred with the realization that public opinion had turned against them. The mother stood straighter now, one hand still on her daughter's shoulder, but no longer trying to make herself small. "Whatever," the man finally said. "We were done shopping anyway." He nudged his friend, and they began to move away, but Andrew gently touched the taller man's arm. "Wait," he said. The man tensed, ready for a fight, but Andrew's face held no anger. "I get it, you know. Times are tough for everybody. My team's parents are always talking about how hard it is to make ends meet. The system doesn't work for most of us." Something flashed across the man's face, surprise, perhaps, at not being villainized. For a brief moment, his defensive posture softened. "But that's why we've got to look out for each other," Andrew continued. "Especially the kids." He nodded toward the little girl, who was now watching them curiously, the fear gradually leaving her eyes. "They see everything we do." The man glanced at the child, then quickly looked away. Without another word, he and his friend walked off, their heavy footsteps echoing down the aisle. The crowd parted to let them pass, some people staring, others looking away awkwardly. The store manager cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I apologize for what happened. Please let me know if there's anything we can do to make your shopping experience better." The woman nodded, still looking slightly dazed by everything that had happened. "Thank you," she said, then turned to Andra. "And thank you. Most people just walk by." As the two men disappeared around the corner, a release of tension rippled through the gathering crowd. People who had been holding their breath now exhaled, shoulders relaxed. A few shoppers nodded approvingly at Andra, while others quickly resumed their shopping, embarrassed by their earlier inaction. The little girl tugged at her mother's dress. "Are the mean men gone?" she asked in a small voice that somehow carried down the aisle. "Yes, baby," her mother answered, smoothing her daughter's hair. "They're gone now." She looked up at Andra, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I don't know how to thank you." Andra shook his head. "No need for thanks. I just did what anybody should do." The store manager, Doug, hovered nearby, still looking uncertain about how to handle the situation. "Do you need me to call someone, ma'am?" "The police, maybe?" The woman shook her head quickly. No police. We're fine now." She straightened her shoulders and adjusted her purse strap. "I still need to finish my shopping." The elderly woman who had spoken up earlier wheeled her cart closer. "I'll shop with you, dear," she offered. "My name's Betty. Been coming to this store for 30 years, and I know where all the best deals are." She winked at the little girl, who gave her a tentative smile in return. "I'd like that," the mother said. "I'm Diane, and this is my daughter Zoe." Zoe stepped out from behind her mother, looking up at Andra with curious eyes. "You're really tall," she observed. Andra chuckled. "That's what everybody tells me." "Are you a basketball player?" she asked. "Close. I coach basketball at the high school down the street." "My daddy was tall too," Zoe said matter-of-factly. "He's in heaven now." Andra knelt down to her level, aware of how his height might be intimidating to a child. "I bet he was a great dad." Zoe nodded solemnly. "The best. He used to put me on his shoulders so I could touch the ceiling." A middle-aged man who had been watching the exchange stepped forward. He wore a postal worker's uniform and had clearly stopped in after his shift. "Excuse me," he said to Diane. "I just wanted to say, my family was on food stamps when I was growing up. 6 kids, my dad got hurt at the factory. Those benefits kept us from going hungry. He glanced around, as if surprised by his own boldness, then continued, "What those guys said, that's not how most of us think." "Thank you," Diane said quietly. Another shopper, a young woman with a baby strapped to her chest, moved closer. "My brother's a veteran," she added, "came back from overseas with PTSD, couldn't work for almost 2 years. Those benefits were a lifeline, not a handout." Something was happening in the grocery store, something unexpected. People were talking to each other, really talking, sharing bits of their lives they usually kept hidden. The manager watched with a mixture of confusion and wonder, as if witnessing a community meeting spontaneously forming in his cereal aisle. An older man in worn work boots cleared his throat. "Doug," he called to the manager, "you've been talking about starting that food drive for months. Maybe it's time to actually do it." Doug blinked in surprise. "You're right, Bill. Let's set something up by the registers this week." Andrew watched these interactions with a growing sense of hope. This was why he coached, why he worked with young people, because he believed in our capacity to be better, to grow, to come together rather than pull apart. The elderly woman, Betty, had already begun guiding Diane and Zoe through their shopping list, pointing out sales and sharing recipes. 3 other customers had joined them, forming an impromptu shopping party. Laughter drifted from their group as Betty apparently told a joke. "You did a good thing," a voice said beside Andra. It was the teenage clerk who had gone to get the manager. "I wanted to say something to those guys, but I was scared I'd lose my job." Andra nodded understandingly. "It's not always easy to speak up, but next time you'll be a little braver, right?" The teen straightened his name tag. "Yeah, next time I will." As the aisle began to clear, Andrew glanced at his watch, suddenly remembering his curry chicken and his waiting nephew. He needed to get back to his own shopping. As he turned to go, a large hand clapped him on the shoulder. It was one of the men who had been watching from a distance. A burly guy with a salt and pepper beard and work-worn hands. "That took guts, brother," he said simply. "Respect." He offered his hand, and Andra shook it, feeling the calluses of a man who worked with his hands for a living. Andra finally made it back to his abandoned shopping cart, surprised to find that someone had thoughtfully moved it to the side, rather than putting the items back on the shelves. As he checked his list, he heard footsteps approaching and looked up to see Diane walking toward him, alone this time. "Betty's showing Zoe the bakery section," she explained with a small smile. "Apparently they give out free cookies to kids if you ask nicely." She fidgeted with the sleeve of her sweater, a worn blue thing that had clearly seen better days. "I wanted to talk to you without my daughter hearing everything." Andrew nodded, giving her his full attention. "What happened back there?" She paused, taking a breath. "It happens more often than you'd think. Usually, I just keep my head down and get through it. That's what I tell Zoe to do too. Don't make a scene. Don't draw attention." She looked down at her hands, the nails short and practical, the skin dry from constant washing. "I work 12-hour shifts at the hospital, sometimes back-to-back when they're short-staffed. But the benefits don't kick in for 3 more months, and Dave's life insurance got tied up in some paperwork mess." "You don't have to explain," Andra said gently. "I know, but I want to." She looked up at him, her eyes clear and direct now. "Because people like those men, they create a story about me in their heads the minute they see me use that EBT card. And that story never includes my nursing degree that I'm still paying off, or how I held my husband's hand while he died from cancer last spring, or how I read to my daughter every night, no matter how tired I am." Andor leaned against his cart listening. Around them, the store continued its normal rhythm, the beep of scanners at the checkout, the squeaky wheels of shopping carts, the tinny music playing overhead. Today, when they started up, I was going to do what I always do: keep quiet, finish shopping, cry in the cart where Zoe can't see. Her voice cracked slightly, but she steadied it. "Then you showed up. And it wasn't just that you stopped them. It was how you did it. You didn't yell or threaten. You just stood there and spoke the truth." From across the store came the sound of a child's laughter. Zoe, presumably delighted with her free cookie. "My husband would have done the same thing," Diane continued. "He always said that the world breaks down when good people get too busy to notice what's happening right in front of them." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, slightly bent at the corners. "I run a support group at the community center for single parents. We'd meet on Thursdays. She held out the card. Maybe you know someone who could use it. Andra took the card, noticing the simple design, just the center's logo and address, and Diane's name with group facilitator underneath. I coach a lot of kids from single-parent homes, he said. This could help their families. That's what I was hoping. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. We serve dinner, and there's childcare. People share resources, job leads, sometimes even babysitting. It's not much, but it's everything, Andra finished. Community is everything. Doug the manager approached, looking more confident than before. Ms. Wilson, he said to Diane, I wanted to let you know that we're starting that food drive next week like I mentioned. And well, the store has a policy about customer harassment that I should have enforced sooner. I apologize for that. Diane nodded her acceptance of the apology. Also, Doug continued, we have a program where we donate day-old bread and about-to-expire produce to the community center. If your group could use any of that, we'd be happy to set aside some items on Thursdays. That would be wonderful, Diane said, her eyes widening in surprise. Betty appeared with Zoe, who was indeed munching happily on a chocolate chip cookie. This little miss is quite the shopper, Betty announced. She knows exactly which cereals have the most sugar. She winked at Diane. Don't worry, I steered her toward the healthier options. Zoe spotted Andra and waved enthusiastically, chocolate smeared on her cheek. Mr. Basketball Coach. The cookie lady said you play basketball with kids. Do you teach girls too or just boys? Andra chuckled. I teach anyone who wants to learn. I want to learn. Mommy says I'm going to be tall like my daddy. She stretched up on her tiptoes to demonstrate. The community center has youth basketball on Saturday mornings, Andra said, looking at Diane. All ages, all skill levels. Can we go, Mommy? Please. Zoe bounced on her feet, energy radiating from her small body. Diane smiled, a weight visibly lifting from her shoulders. We'll see. I'm not working this Saturday. An announcement came over the store speakers about a cleanup needed in aisle 7. The spell of the moment started to break as everyone remembered they had groceries to buy, dinners to cook, lives to return to. We should finish up, Diane said, taking Zoe's sticky hand. We've got homework to do tonight. I'll see you around, Andrew replied. Maybe Saturday at the courts. 3 months later, Andrew pushed through the double doors of the community center, carrying a box of donated basketball jerseys. Saturday morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the gymnasium, creating bright squares on the polished floor. The sound of bouncing balls and children's voices echoed off the walls. Coach! Zoe spotted him immediately and ran over, her sneakers squeaking against the floor. She had grown at least an inch since he'd first met her in the grocery store. Look what I can do now. She dribbled the ball with surprising control for a 6-year-old, switching from her right hand to her left. That's some serious skill, Andrew said, genuinely impressed. You've been practicing. Every day, she declared proudly. Mommy put up a little hoop in our apartment. The neighbors complained at first, but then Mrs. Rodriguez from downstairs started playing with me too. She was on a team when she was young. Diane approached, looking different than she had that day in the store. Her shoulders were straighter, her smile came easier. She wore a volunteer t-shirt that matched the ones worn by several other adults helping with the youth program. The famous curry chicken chef, she greeted him. Your nephew hasn't stopped talking about that recipe you shared at the potluck last month. Andrew laughed. Family secret. My grandmother would haunt me if she knew I was giving it away. The community center's Saturday program had grown significantly in recent weeks. What started as a simple basketball clinic had expanded to include homework help, a parent resource corner, and a community meal afterward. People from the neighborhood took turns cooking, sharing family recipes and cultural traditions. Guess who's here today? Diane said, nodding toward the bleachers. Andor followed her gaze and was surprised to see one of the men from the grocery store, the shorter one, sitting awkwardly in the stands. He looked uncomfortable, out of place among the parents watching their children play. He came last week too, Diane explained. Just sat there the whole time watching, didn't talk to anyone. What's his story? Andrew asked. His name's Ray, works at the auto shop down the street. His daughter's in the younger group. She nodded toward a small girl with braided hair, practicing with a foam ball at the smaller hoops. His wife left last year. He's raising her alone. Andrew watched Ray for a moment, seeing how he leaned forward whenever his daughter made a shot, the pride evident even from a distance. Has he said anything about the store? No. Diane shook her head. But he apologized the first day he brought his daughter. Didn't make excuses, just said he was sorry and that he was trying to do better. On the other side of the gym, Betty sat at a folding table covered with pamphlets and printouts, information about food assistance, healthcare options, job training, and childcare resources. The parent corner had been her idea. Now she came every Saturday, armed with reading glasses, a laptop, and decades of knowledge about navigating the system. Doug from the grocery store hired 2 of our parents last month, Diane continued. Remember that teenager who was too scared to speak up? He's in college now, but he comes by to volunteer when he's home on breaks. The Thursday support group had outgrown its original room at the center. What began as 5 or 6 single parents sharing resources had become a network of over 30 families who helped each other with everything from childcare to car repairs. Some were struggling financially. Others were well off but facing the emotional challenges of solo parenting. All of them found something they needed in that circle of folding chairs. Andrew set down the box of jerseys and watched the organized chaos of the gymnasium. Volunteers moved between groups of children, teaching, encouraging, sometimes just listening. Parents chatted in the stands, exchanging phone numbers and advice. The community that had begun to form in a grocery store aisle had taken root and flourished. We're starting a mentorship program next month, Diane said, pairing adults with kids who need some extra support. She gave him a meaningful look. We could use more men like you. Before Andrew could respond, Ray approached, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Hey, he said to Andrew, his eyes darting away and then back. I was hoping to catch you today. Andrew nodded, waiting. My daughter loves this program, Ray continued. Talks about it all week. And, I was wondering if you needed any help with transportation. I know some of these kids don't have rides. I could maybe set up a carpool or something. I've got a van from the shop I could use on Saturdays. That would be great, actually, Andrew said, extending his hand. Ray took it, the handshake awkward but genuine. Outside the gymnasium windows, the neighborhood spread out in all directions, apartment buildings, small houses, the grocery store visible a few blocks away. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. People who had once passed each other without a glance now stopped to talk, to help, to share what they had. Zoe ran back over, breathless with excitement. Coach, I made 3 baskets in a row. Better watch out, Andrew said to Ray with a smile. Future WNBA star right here. Zoe beamed, then turned serious. Coach says I need to work on my defense. Can you help me practice, Mommy? Of course, baby, Diane replied. As they walked back to the court together, Andrew thought about that day in the grocery store. One moment, one decision that seemed so small at the time. He hadn't known then that standing up for a stranger would create ripples that would continue to spread outward, touching lives he hadn't even met yet. He picked up a basketball and joined the children on the court. Sometimes the biggest changes started with the smallest choices. Sometimes all it took to build a community was for one person to be brave enough to say, "Not here, not today, not while I'm around."